Alrighty, so thank you all for joining us tonight as we dive into the University of California Schools application system. So there is a lot of information for us to go through, so we will dive in. That poll that was launched, we have quite a few parents, students, families, a few college counselors, and teachers. So thank you all for being here tonight. We know there are a lot of different ways you can be spending your time, so thank you for signing on with us. Just some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you have any comments or replies to the questions that we may or may not ask during tonight's webinar, you can put those in the chat box. Also, please don't use the raised hand feature. We won't be utilizing that tonight. If you have any questions for our speaker, you can put them in the Q&A and we will get to those at the end. If you have the latest version of Zoom, you can turn on your closed captions and translations. I will also send out this recording tomorrow, so if you want to revisit any part of it, check your inbox. It'll also be on our website, or if by the afternoon you don't get it, send me an email. All right, and with that, I will let our host introduce himself.
All right. So, hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Wexler. I've been with Ingenious Prep for over a year now. I've had kind of an interesting past. So, I was a teacher for a number of years. Went and did my master's degree at University of Pennsylvania. I actually did a couple of years teaching abroad in Japan. I was a teacher for about 14 years before I moved into college counseling. Part of that journey took place with the University of California system. I worked for 2 years with them as part of their application evaluation team, particularly for international applications. Right over about 2,000 applications in total for UC applicants, which was just a great experience to kind of understand how it is on the other side, and now I bounce back to the counseling side with Ingenious Prep.
Okay, awesome. And I am Dorothy 140, the Marketing and Special Projects Manager here at Ingenious. And if this is your first time joining us, there are a few stops on our roadmap that we have to hit first before we can dive in. So this roadmap breaks down a little bit of why Ingenious is a little bit different in the education space. So first up, our counselors. So we have built a team of over 150 former admissions officers from top schools all across the country. So like Jeffrey with the UC system, we have counselors from MIT, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Duke, Yale, Princeton, just to name a few. And our former admissions officers work on a 2-on-1 team with our graduate coaches to create personalized admission strategies for your students. So these lovely faces you see on the screen are graduates from these top universities. They know exactly what it takes to become students there because they have done it themselves. Our resources. So we give our students access to a plethora of resources. We know that the admissions space is changing every day, so we need to have our students prepared for everything that the admissions committee could be looking for. So our academic mentorships, our leadership and innovation lab, internships, of course, subject tutoring and test prep, and reflective and academic writing seminars. In those resources are academic mentorship, so students will conduct individualized mentorship in an area of their interest. So this past summer, we had courses in machine learning and AI. We had a course, Is It Legal? Going over different legal scenarios and their legal ramifications. This coming fall, we have courses in a classic, our Fundamentals of Cancer Biology. We have a course about using AI and AI technology and applying it to climate issues and how we can use the technology to solve those kinds of problems. We have had courses in the statistics of basketball, real estate courses, business courses, so a variety of courses for a variety of student interests. Which brings us to our curriculum. So we build our curriculum taking objective insights from our former admissions officers. So we've picked their brain, we've gotten all of those little insider secrets, and we've taken them and put them together to create our systematic and operational curriculum. And we use that to train and maintain our counseling team. So, through this kind of hive mind that we have created, say your student is really interested in Berkeley, but they are working with a FAO from Stanford and a GC from Yale. Through the hive mind and all of the collective knowledge that we have gotten from our counselors, your student will still have access to all of the information for their top schools and any other schools that they're interested in. All of that information will be at their fingertips, even though they're working with those two counselors from those other schools. Which brings us to our last stop, our results. So last year, our students received 160 Ivy League plus top 10 offers, over 500 top 30 offers, and over 1,400 top 100 offers. So overall, last year was a great year for us, and we are gearing up for another successful year. But before we get into all of what we are here for, we have to understand how our applications will be processed. So once your student submits the application that they have spent months working on, it'll get sent over to the admissions officer, Mrs. Admissions Office, excuse me, where it will be added to their pile of thousands of applications. If those applications were still printed out, they could be in a stack as tall as a 20-story building, just to give you a little context of how many applications and how many pages we're talking about. Those applications are then separated, most of the time by region. And then each admissions officer gets a digital pile. That admissions officer reviews all of the applications in their pile and selects the handful that they would like to admit. Then all of the admissions officers come back as a committee to debate who should be accepted or rejected. So, the takeaway from all of this, and something to keep in mind, is the UC Admissions Office has made many changes over the past few years. And as an applicant, it's still key to make an impression on the admissions officer assigned to your file so that they will advocate for you so you'll be admitted. So your application really has to make that reader and those admissions officers want to shout and scream from the rooftops that you need to go to their school. And we will get into how you can do that.
Okay, that's my turn. So I'll take over from here. I'll start off by giving you all a breakdown of the different schools within the University of California system. I'm going to go back quickly. So there are nine of the schools that are part of the undergraduate process. So one of them through San Francisco is only graduate schools. So that's not listed on here. So if you are a senior or in high school on a different grade, you would be looking forward to applying as an undergraduate freshman at any one of these nine schools within the University of California system. If you're less familiar with all the schools on here, the couple that probably stand out the most are UC Berkeley and UCLA. The number of applications that both those schools receive compared to the other ones would also support that as well. But we'll get into a breakdown of it. So this is kind of listed by the U.S. News ranking, and the first two schools we'll cover is just, of course, the two more popular ones, UCLA and UC Berkeley. You can see that UCLA has a 9% acceptance rate. It's the lowest of the nine schools. Very popular with for business and medicine and great engineering program. Also has one of the best, if not the best, theater and film school in the U.S. And also tied along right with that is UC Berkeley. The acceptance rate is just a tick higher at 11.7%, but you're kind of splitting hairs there between the two. It's still going to be considered a highly selective school. Great with STEM, including chemistry, engineering. It is the flagship school out of all of them. And moving right along, we have UC San Diego, and this school has jumped up in the rankings over the years. Acceptance rate is 25%, so is a little bit more attainable than the other two, but still going to be pretty selective of a school. It is combined six different colleges, which you can apply to and rank as you're applying. So it's kind of a unique thing. I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's very well known for, again, engineering and oceanography, marine science. We have UC Irvine, also kind of in the LA area, very good with public health and biology, medical studies. It's ranked 33rd according to US News. Acceptance rate is about on par with UC San Diego. We have UC Davis, also ranked and tied with Irvine. We have seen this school in particular get more selective over the years, especially compared to when I started off in college counseling. It started off as an agricultural school, and to this day, it's probably leading in agricultural science, engineering sciences, also very elite with veterinary medicine, and ranked at number 39 according to U.S. News. You'll see that this one has a lower acceptance rate. It's about on par with UC San Diego and UC Irvine. Is UC Santa Barbara, well known for its Nobel laureates in physics, also excellent with environmental studies. And next we have UC Merced. This is the newest one, founded in 2005. The acceptance rate you'll notice here is very high compared to its ranking, and one of the reasons for that is that again it's new. A lot of the students who apply to UC Merced are tend to be more in-state compared to out-of-state students, but it has an excellent school of environmental engineering. And here we have UC Riverside. Again, if you're going to look at all the 9 schools and say which one of these for me would most likely be kind of on the safer side, you're going to look at UC Riverside and UC Merced amongst the two as of right now, but things change. Um, Interesting enough is they are number one ranked for entomology. If any of you are in this group are interested in studying insects, this would be a school for you. But of course, it has many other excellent programs as well. We also have UC Santa Cruz, and amongst this group of schools, this one's probably more of the liberal arts field than compared to the other ones. Again, compared to your level of academic rigor and how well you're doing in school, this might be considered also more of a safer school for you as well, but also excellent with engineering and environmental science, environmental studies. So that's kind of a list of all the schools within the UC system. The application has not really changed much. It is still around the same time. It used to be November 30th. Last year was December 2nd. It's going to be around the same time every year, about the end of November or very beginning of December. The application opens up in October. You can submit the application whenever you're ready, anytime after October 1st. But they will read through. There is one application deadline. There's no early decision. There's no rolling, none of that kind of stuff. It's just one application deadline. If you are looking for financial aid, that is something that needs to be submitted to the school by March 2nd at the latest. These schools are all self-reporting. You will self-report all of your classes, your grades, and test scores. I know they're test blind. I'll get into that later, what I mean by test scores. But the transcripts, they have a transcript policy where it'll come sometime toward the end of the school year, and they will, of course, want to see the transcript being an accurate reflection of what you reported as students. So if you were to be accepted to any one of those schools, they would give you further instructions on when to expect to submit that transcript. So some updates on the UC system. They have recorded, and this has been each year, including when I was working with UC Berkeley, they have seen a sharp increase in applications. The last cycle alone was a record high amongst all the campuses. Collectively, they have over 250,000 applications that they receive. Of course, some of you may know that you can apply to not just one, but all of them with the same application. So a lot of that 250,000 are students applying to multiple schools. This was a 20,000 application increase since last year, and we would expect that trend to either stay consistent or to tick upwards as these schools get more and more popular. If you were to look at this grouping, you would see that UCLA does tend to receive the most amount of applications. Next up would be UC Berkeley, but UC San Diego again has gotten a lot more popular recently. And that would also explain why it has jumped in the rankings. Again, it's all about that supply and demand. And then, of course, coming in on the other end, Merced tends to receive the fewest applications, along with Riverside and Santa Cruz. The applicant pool is continuing to get more and more diverse. And this is something that the University of California emphasizes and trying to seek opportunities when they go out and market the school to find diversity within the applicant pool. And so that's seen in a number of different ways. We've seen that with an increase in different minority groups, Latino groups, African American groups. We have also seen a increase in community college transfers as well. Those would be students who start off in community colleges around those UC schools, and they act as kind of a filter into the UC system. We've also seen an increase in first generation students. And again, this is more about how or what kind of demographic groups they're trying to market to try to increase applications within those demographics. We've also, again, seen an increase in low income students, students applying for financial aid. That has grown almost 41%. Again, they've made a significant focus on trying to get students who seek financial aid to consider UC as a viable option for them for college. So, what are some insights that we've been able to glean through at Ingenious Prep? So, what do admissions officers look at now that the UC schools are test blind, right? So, we know that since you can no longer send an SAT or ACT score as of multiple years ago, they made a commitment to stay test blind. They have gone very much heavy in two different directions. One would be the academic side with your grades and your course rigor. The other side would be your extracurriculars, and they've designed the application to allow you to really emphasize those strengths in both areas. Your course rigor is going to really matter. A lot of these schools are direct entry for the major you're applying to. And so again, for example, when I was reading at UC Berkeley, students who were applying to engineering or other STEM related fields, we had to make note if they were able to take the highest level of science and math that was offered in their school. Again, if your school doesn't offer, for example, like AP, so for math, it would be UC Calc, or I'm sorry, AP Calc BC. If you were not able to take that and it was offered at your school, that would be a consideration. But if it was not offered at your school, they would not count that against you, for example. But again, math and your level of math is going to be considered at all the UC schools for STEM students. And then you have other considerations too, like at Santa Cruz, they tend to look at this for computer science, which we tend to see as a very competitive major at many schools, not just the UC schools. Some other insights. So there's again additional focus on the curriculum and student performance and success in the individual and school context. I'm going to talk today a lot about the school context and how they're going to kind of evaluate you based off of what that context looks like in multiple different areas. They are going to take a lot of interest in what you did to challenge yourself as a student, what you should be considering in terms of, what is offered to you in your school or your community and what you did to take part of that. Make sure that when you're reporting your grades, you are being accurate with it. And I'll get more into that with the grade reporting section. So let's get into the application itself, and we'll take a closer look at what are all the ins and outs of the UC application. Okay, so again, the UC application is its own standalone application system. You can only apply to the UC school within that application. You will not find it on the Common App. If anyone still uses Coalition app, or I know it combined with Score, so if anyone's using that in your school, you wouldn't find it in there. It's kind of similar to the Apply Texas system and or other schools that are standalone applications like MIT or Georgetown. So again, UC's is your one-stop shop for all the UC applications, and you can't find it anywhere else. Once you get to the website, you'll see this page, 9 campuses, 1 application. They do again emphasize the ease to which you can apply to 9 schools with 1 application, of course, with a application fee for each school. You can ignore that apply by November 30th sign. Again, that's changed this year to December 1st, but that's just kind of a screenshot to show you what it would look like on the main page. Okay, so we're going to break down the different parts of the application, starting with the first one, which is going to be about you. This might be the easiest part of the application, honestly. And just like the Common App, if you're familiar with that or have done that already, they're going to ask you a lot of the same questions. They're going to ask you all about your contact information, about where you come from, what kind of household are you living in, who your parents are, all that kind of information. This is kind of a screenshot showing that. Here is an interesting question. They ask you about your income. While I was reading for UC Berkeley, we would see all kinds of different answers. Some kids would leave it blank. Other students would put in, well, depending on the country, I've seen various income ranges. I've seen even students listing 1 million plus. Again, what they're trying to do is they're just trying to evaluate who you are based on the context you come from. Okay, so it's going to be important to, if you don't know the exact number, to try to give them a ballpark number with that. They also want to know, if you're living with 1 parent or 2 parents or who your legal guardians are, and then how many people live again in your household. Again, all that is taken into consideration. Leaving things blank just kind of creates sort of it doesn't help them understand the context better. So these are things that they're kind of trying to see through that information. If you grew up with a single parent or a divorced home, if one of your parents unfortunately passed away, they also want to know about educational background and what your parents do, if they've gone to college, if you are the oldest or youngest sibling, or how many siblings you have. Again, the more information you can fill out, the better they can understand who you are within the context of your background. Some key mistakes to avoid. So in the United States, culturally, our first name is our given name and our last name is our family name. I do know in other cultures, again, I mentioned I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I know in that country it's common for the family name to be first and then the given name. Just be careful with filling that information out. You want that information to match up with your documents, right? Um, don't confuse your school address and your home address. I know that might sound silly to some, but I've seen all different kinds of things when I read applications. Also, be sure to note if you are a citizen or a green card holder, or if you're an international student as well. If you were to be accepted, there's different follow-up information that would be needed as a result of that. Also, don't be humble with this application. If you speak more than one language at home, mention that. Be clear with that. That's one of the things that helps make you stand out, right, as an applicant. Let's get into the different campuses and majors. Okay, so when you go to the application, you'll notice here that you have the option of checking all those boxes. You'll also notice that $0 is going to probably creep up with the more boxes you click. That's to be expected, of course. That should be a conversation between you and your parents, and of course your counselor. It is possible, it is very possible for a lot of students to create a balanced application list just within the UC system itself. You can pick your reach schools, your target schools, your safety schools, etc. Okay, with each school you pick, you will also have to declare majors within each of those. Some of them may give you the option of a second major depending on the school. And of course, the majors may have different names or be housed in different colleges or things like that. So those are all different considerations when you're filling this out. Our advice to you is not to choose undecided, right? It is to help them because when you're applying, you want to apply with an application persona. This is who I am. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I would like to pursue at your campus. If you apply undecided, you're kind of leaving that last part blank. And again, it just kind of leaves some holes in your application. And it makes it harder for them to kind of get a full evaluation of you. So my advice to you is even if you truly are undecided, I would recommend picking something that you do have an interest in or an area where you're leaning in a certain way. Of course, there are going to be more fields that are more popular than other fields. There are going to be schools that have, fewer majors or fewer seats for those students, for example, and it may be harder to get into for that reason. We recommend not just picking a different major because it's easier. Again, some of those schools are direct entry. And let's say you pick, I don't know, philosophy and you're trying to get into a STEM field, that may not be an easy thing to do to transition into that particular major. And now you're at a school majoring in something that you didn't have an interest in, right? So again, what we recommend is making sure that your plans for where you're applying to the school and what majors you pick does support your application persona, who you are as a student. One last thing here I'll mention about the UC San Diego application. I did mention you get to rank the 6 undergraduate colleges. This is kind of a unique thing to just UC San Diego. They have 6 colleges, and you can rank them. They give you a description of what they are and what their interests are, and you get to pick which one you have the most interest in and which one you have the least interest in. That is not going to hurt your ability to get into the school either way. What those are is they're kind of like thematic groups where you can pick. Depending on the college you got into, you take certain classes that relate to that area before you go on to pursue classes that pertain more to your major. So again, you can apply with a certain major in mind while also applying to a different college to start off with your freshman year classes. So that's kind of a unique thing that UC San Diego does. And if you do add that to your application, just be aware that you will have to rank those 6 colleges. So let's get into reporting your academic history. All right. You'll start off with any high school level classes that you took in grades 7 and 8. You'll report those. Next would be your high school classes, all the classes you took, and all the courses that you took. And you can start with grade 9 and move and work your way up. If you are coming in here from a British system, say a GCSE or with A-level exams, you'd report everything starting from year 9, going all the way up to your final year in high school. If you took any college level courses like dual enrollment, things like that, anything that was credit bearing, you could also list that as well in this section. And any other academic history that you have, say some courses that you took on the side, could be added here as well. The UC system is kind of unique. It shows a listing of courses by subject area that it correlates to a letter, the A through G system, so the alphabet system. This was designed for students in a California public school, and this was somebody from the UC Davis actually first explained this to me years back. So he explained that it is based on the California public school system. It is not meant to mirror every single curriculum out there. They do take that into consideration. If you come from a curriculum that does not fit evenly into these different subject areas, their recommendation is just to do the best you can do to find which letter those courses that you took fit into. That is not going to count against you. Again, that was just something that they did for ease of access because it is a UC school. It is a state school in California, and they based it off of, again, the California public school system. So again, the recommendation and the advice is just to do the best you can do, filling in the courses that you took with which letter that you feel it best associates with. Now, we did mention that the UC school is test blind. I sometimes say test blind with air quotes because what that really means is they don't want you to report your SAT or ACT score. Even if you had an excellent score, during my time reading for Berkeley, you'd be surprised at the number of kids who would try to find a place in the application to fit that in. They might mention it in their essay. or in the additional comment section. If they want to talk, if they got a really high score and they want to mention that, that is not something that we can consider in the evaluation process as part of you. It does not fit the form that is used to score applicants. There's nowhere to assess that information. Do not include it. They tell you not to, and I would recommend respecting their requirements with that. However, they do want you to report your AP exam scores, should you have taken any, your IB exams, and that's going to go for any IB exams you took prior to grade 12 or your last year in high school. And they also want you to report what you think your predicted exam scores are going to be. Of course, most kids would put a 7 on there, and that's to be expected. They don't count that against you or for you. They just want you to list it so they have that information so they know how many tests you plan to take at the end of your studies. That would also include, again, students in a GCSE program with A-level exams. They would want you to report the GCSEs, and they'd also want you to report any A-levels you may have already taken or A-levels you will take at the end of your high school career. That would include any other curriculum around the world that would involve some kind of test with a test score to graduate, of course. If English is not your first language, they do want you to take a TOEFL or IELTS. They will accept an 80. They prefer a 100 for the TOEFL. With IELTS, they want anything a 6.5 or higher to be considered a student who is fluent enough to do well in a UC system. Now, if you have not yet taken the TOEFL or IELTS by the time you apply to the school, that's okay. That's not going to count against you. You can list on the application that when your future test date will be. So if you have that scheduled for a later date, you can list that on the application. Let's get into the activities and awards section. This is going to be after filling out all the other bits and pieces I mentioned, including the coursework. So here, this is going to be anything that you did beyond the classroom. Okay. And I want to be careful with that because there were times I would read students, essays and activities and things like that. And it became pretty clear going into it that it was a classroom project or an assignment they had to do or a class field trip. Those would not be things they want you to talk about in the activities and awards section. They want you to mention only things that happened outside the classroom setting. Okay, so any coursework other than mentioning the A through G, so anything that doesn't fit the mold there. So if some kind of elective you can include here, that's one exception to what I just mentioned. But in addition to that would be some kind of educational prep program, say it be like a summer course, or something you did in the evenings, or if you did some kind of free course like through Coursera or edX, for example, any volunteer and community service work, any work you did for a paid experience that would be like an internship or a job you had, any awards and honors. And in the Common App, the awards and honors are things you typically list first and then go into the activities. But this is things that you would list in addition to all the other activities, and you simply select which category you're inputting. And if it is an award you won or an honor you received, you would list that in this section as well. Any extracurricular activities that you were involved in. Again, anything that doesn't fit beyond volunteer work or work experience or things like that. So this is going to be the more broader one used for anything that can include athletics or clubs or things like that. And again, here is just a breakdown giving you some information of what each of them shows you. So it does help you by giving you a description of what each of those categories are. And again, just like the A through G system, do the best you can do to find the category that best fits that activity that you want to mention. Okay. The other unique thing about the UC School application is it has up to 20 different entries, which is more than the Common App allows. Again, it just kind of tells you the emphasis that they put on your extracurricular involvement, maybe even compare it to what other schools would use to evaluate you. One other thing that the UC application does is it allows you for more space to describe those activities. I actually think personally that it's easier, my time working with students on the counselor side, filling this out. I think it's actually easier to do the UC activity section because they give you more space to just give more detail. It's actually a harder task, in my opinion, to fit all the cool things, the great things that you did into such a small 150 character space. So this allows you for more room to even use full sentences if you need to. The character counts vary depending on what it is, between 250 and 350 typically. But again, for honors awards, things like that, you tend to not need as much space to list what those were. But it is important to give context when you're filling these out. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about how to fill out that context within it, right? So your goals for here is to emphasize anything that was leadership. It doesn't have to be an official, like a officer position like president or secretary or things like that. Leadership can be defined in multiple ways, including, when you kind of stepped up with your team, or when you had an initiative that you led, or some event that you got very involved in, or a situation where you again stepped up. For example, it could be on a sports team where you kind of stepped up to be the voice to help your team to a victory. Those are all different ways where leadership can be included, and it should be again considered when you're filling out these areas of your application and what you're doing to describe it. Tangible achievements. Don't be vague here. There were some applications I read in my day where it would say won multiple awards. Well, that's great, but I don't know what those awards were. Were they something only in your school? Were they national awards? Were they how many teams competed? Where did you rank amongst those teams? And what was your specific role within that team that you were on? Another thing they want to have you mention is the sustained involvement. And this is one thing that they definitely look for in students. They like to see students who have been involved over a period of time. So not someone who jumps around from club to club over each year, but someone who has been involved over a number of years and has grown within that involvement in some way. So maybe you've stepped up to being a leader. Maybe you've gotten more involved in helping that club or that organization grow in some way. We also recommend that you start with the activities that best emphasize your application persona. These are things that you want to show, if you have an interest in a certain area of study, what you did beyond the classroom to seek out those opportunities. And of course, being clear and organized in the formatting. And again, I want to emphasize being clear with it because they are really using this to kind of get a better sense of who you are. So being vague is not going to be something that's going to help you with these applications. We'll get into briefly about scholarships and programs. So again, it is a state school for students in the state of California. They get the in-state tuition. Students out of state do not. But there are scholarships offered at each school, and their criteria for that varies. And they have different deadlines for when to apply for those scholarships. When I worked for Berkeley, for example, there was a Regents Scholar that we could, if we felt very, very strongly about an applicant. These were applicants that were kind of like a cut above the rest in terms of their excellence. We could nominate them for that Regent Scholarship, and they would get contacted later if they were accepted and wished to apply for that. So again, these are opportunities that are offered beyond just financial aid. And it's going to vary, of course, within each UC school what gets offered. And last, we'll get to the kind of the meat and potatoes of the application, the personal insight questions, or what's commonly referred to as the PIQs. Okay. So in this section, I'll cover what those PIQs or personal insight questions are. And I'll also cover that additional comment section and give you some advice on how to best use that on your application. So the emphasis here is on showing, not telling, and we tell that to students a lot when we counsel them through this process, but really giving clear examples, giving good visuals, lots of details. This is your opportunity to take what was in your activity list and expand upon it. to give more context. Because again, although they give you more character space in the Common App, they only give you 350 characters for a lot of those different activities. This is your opportunity to take that and expand upon it within 350 words. And so there were a lot of times while I was reading applications where I would say, I really wish the student would have explained that activity more because it sounded like a really cool thing. And I think it really would have been a strength, but they just didn't pick a question that they could use that activity for. So again, really take this time in the PIQs to look at your activity list, look at your application persona, and say, how can I best make um, use of these PIQs in this section of the application to highlight my strengths, right? Highlight what makes me unique and show good visual details. Be clear about that. Show your personality again. All of that's going to be helpful for you. So you get 8 prompts and they ask you to pick four. You'll see that a lot of these prompts, they're going to kind of give you clues into how the UC schools are going to evaluate you. Beyond, of course, the academics, how are they going to evaluate you in terms of your extracurriculars? So if you look at the keywords within these prompts, you can kind of glean out some of the important keywords here that they're going to be looking for in your PIQs. So describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. And so, again, those are different ways of showing leadership. You don't have to hit all of those, but what they're really asking for you here is what way did you really stand out exceptionally as a leader? Where did you make a difference in terms of leadership in your school? Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, I don't think I have an example of that, good news is you have 7 other PIQ prompts that you can pick. And so again, we'll talk about which ones you should pick, right? Which ones are going to best emphasize your strengths. We'll go to the second one is every person has a creative side and it can be expressed in many ways. Problem solving, original innovative thinking, and artistically to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So again, they like students who are creative and creativity is one way that you can stand out in your application. So if you have an area of your extracurricular profile where you have shown creativity, this is your opportunity, if it was listed in your activity section, to really highlight those and how you stood out in a creative way, what you did to kind of make some kind of change or kind of stand out as an exceptional student creatively. So did you innovate something? Did you work on a project that you were able to market to other people? I've seen all kinds of things. I've seen students who created their own clothing. They designed their own clothing. They made it. They created websites for it. So there's just different examples of it. I've seen students who were poets, artists. It doesn't have to be just art, though. It can be, again, problem solving. So I had a student who applied once and he designed his own drones and talked about that again. So it's different ways you can be creative than your traditional thinking of that. Again, if that's not a strength for you, don't pick that one. What would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? This can be an area that it kind of overlaps with the creativity, but it could also just be a skill. So here it could be something that you've learned over time. So let's say you're interested in computer science and you've really developed your programming skills. That could be something you want to highlight because I would probably bet that you didn't just develop those skills within a classroom setting. You've probably gone beyond the classroom and you've worked on that in your own time, even if it was like game design or game, modification, things like that. Those are different ways where you can highlight a skill that you've acquired along the way and really where you've shown in that light, so to speak. The next one, describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. They like to see students who persevere. And it doesn't have to be something traumatic, so to speak, but it can be something that was a hurdle or a setback that you were able to overcome. They love that success story. And some students had to overcome some kind of hardship, economic hardship, or something personal, or they traveled in a new setting, in a new environment, or they shifted to a different curriculum that was a whole complete change for them. So there's different ways where you can show facing some kind of hardship, some kind of barrier that you were able to overcome to persevere over. The next prompt, describe the most, excuse me, the most significant challenge you faced and the steps you've taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So this is, again, it kind of overlaps with the previous question, but this time instead of maybe a barrier, an educational barrier or some other obstacle, what other challenge did you have in your life that you can talk about that you maybe helped overcome? The next prompt, think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you have furthered this interest inside and or outside the classroom. I'm going to tell you right now, you would definitely want to emphasize the learning outside the classroom. You can mention how it started, maybe as a seed, so to speak, in your class, but how that seed, developed, blossomed, so to speak, outside the classroom. So they love that student who has a passion for learning, and they want to know how you pursued learning opportunities beyond the class. The next one, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? This is another one where you can emphasize either volunteer work, leadership, club involvement, something like that, something beyond the school, whether that be with, a church group or another religious group, or any other kind of affiliation. What have you done to better your area around you? You can probably imagine during the COVID era, we had a lot of students talk about how they helped, the neighborhood they lived in deal with COVID in some way, by donating food or some other capacity. Of course, we're beyond those years now of the lockdowns, and so they would expect you not to really mention that, to mention something more relevant in more recent years. But other examples, of course, that can come about. The last one is beyond what has already been shared in your application. What do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate? This is kind of your catch-all. And let me emphasize here, if you are answering this question, unless you are absolutely only going to be applying to one of the UC schools, don't mention that school specifically in the section here. I have read a lot of essays for Berkeley where the student explained why they were a great fit for UCLA. Not a great move to do if you're applying to more than one school, so be careful with this. I would say make it more general to why you are a strong candidate for UC, but don't emphasize the UC aspect of it. They really want you talking more about yourself and why what you have done in some way to stand out, to grow as a student, to really move yourself into a position now where you're ready to move into the UC to one of the UC campuses. So that's kind of your catch-all PIQ if you don't think you're a good fit for some of the other ones. So how do you choose the prompts, right? We talked about that a little bit. I'm going to emphasize you choose 4 of those prompts, and you pick the prompts that speak to you, the ones that you think, okay, I think I got this. I think I can answer this. Which one helps you best show your character, your experiences, your accomplishments. Use that opportunity to really expand upon that, to give context where it is. Whatever you cannot fit in the activity section, use the PIQs for that purpose. Okay. Do the prompts invite you to demonstrate self-understanding, personal growth, or your passionate interests? Again, they always like to see students being reflective, students who are thoughtful, students who've shown how they've grown along the way with what they've learned or what they've done, what they've experienced. Do the prompts emphasize your unique perspective on a given topic? If you've, again, learned some valuable skill, what have you learned and how have you grown that? Some other insights here. Think about what you want your reader to learn about you and choose prompts that lets you show it. Okay, again, this is an opportunity for you to give more information, more context. We do recommend not kind of going into like personal viewpoints, anything that may be considered controversial. You want to stay focused on yourself, on your accomplishments, on your strengths. Make sure the prompts are relevant to you when considered within the larger pool of applicants. So who are the kind of students applying to the UC schools, right? There's a lot of competition out there. So make sure the prompts that you're addressing can best emphasize your strengths. Know yourself, know your writing habits. I always tell students if they're not poets, don't write poetry. Choose the prompts that best help you emphasize those strengths again. Okay, some more information here. So when you choose a topic, think about the following. Think about your application persona, right? So you definitely want to make sure you pick a question that can emphasize your application persona, that can emphasize your strengths academically, and also what extracurricular opportunities you've sought out that helps to show that persona. Think about your audience. Who are the people reading it? Each of the UC schools have two people reading each application, until then it gets filtered into the group where they advocate for who gets accepted and who should be denied, of course. Think about your competition. Again, there's a lot of stiff competition out there. A lot of students, 250,000 applications is a very large application pool. Okay. So when you're writing these PIQs, how should you start? We recommend, of course, doing something to capture or to captivate the reader. So start with a strong hook to lead them into it, but also make sure you have an overall message of your takeaway, right? Your so what, the message that you want to emphasize of how you grew within this question that you're answering, okay? And of course, within the middle of all that, you want to have it full of different forms of evidence to support your message here, right? So again, the activity list is just kind of like the starting point, but then the PIQs are really where you can take that away and give more context into your accomplishments. Some key mistakes to avoid. Don't use the PIQs to just rewrite your resume or relist your accomplishments. You were already given that opportunity in the activities section. Don't try to do too much. Stay within the confines of the prompt itself. Don't over exaggerate adversity. Again, we're all humans and we can all kind of see things differently. And I would, again, be honest with yourself and be honest with who you are. And then again, pick those PIQs that, again, best emphasize those strengths, right? So don't try to like stretch truths too much. Again, people can see through that. But on the other side, don't sell yourself short. This is your section to brag. This is your section to tell these admissions officers how amazing of a student that you are. Okay. Um, don't emphasize middle school achievements. If they were something you started in middle school and carried on through high school, that is something to be considered. But if it did not continue into high school, we would say don't mention that, of course. Don't write about other people. Don't write about your parents or your family. Write about yourself. Make sure that if you are including other people, the focus is always going to be back on you, your growth, your reflection, your experiences. Don't come across sounding arrogant, of course. That's kind of, goes without saying. Be careful with the cliches and platitudes. Again, when you're reading thousands of applications, we see things over and over and over again. So make sure that you always are staying on topic and you have a purpose within what you're writing about. Be careful also with grammar. I'll just say that. Again, they don't grade you on your grammar use, but if it is something unintelligible, it's just harder for us to evaluate you on how you did, or what you were able to accomplish. So make sure again that your wording is very clean and coherent. There is an additional comment section at the end of that, and this is what it's going to look like. If there's anything else you want us to know about you, now's your chance. But remember, you should use this space only if you want to describe anything that you have not had the opportunity to do. This shouldn't be an essay, but rather a place to explain unusual personal or family circumstances, anything that may be unclear in other parts of the application. I will talk about what I've seen during my time for UC Berkeley. There were some students who had to explain, hey, my school is an AP school and they don't let us take any AP classes the freshman year. and the most we can take is 3 AP classes. That's good information to know. When they read your application, they're going to be reading it within the school context of where you came from. So it's going to be important to know that they're not going to use that information against you. You can only do what you're able to do. So if your school has certain parameters or restrictions, that is all taken into context. And if you feel the need to re-explain that to them, the additional comment section would be a great way to do that. Okay. If you had some kind of extenuating circumstance, so if you had some kind of personal trauma or something where you saw your grade dip, but you were able to recover from it, again, not only is that something that they like to see, like the perseverance, but it's also something that could go into here to explain that away because they may not know that unless you tell them, right? Um, you can include links to research or portfolios. Not every school in the UC system allows their application readers to click on those, but if you do feel you have something that you wanted to show that you explained about in your essays, you're welcome to put it there. Again, the key here though is to keep the section short. It is not like okay, here's a bunch of other essays, here's all the essays that I wrote or the research I did, or you don't have to include that. I would recommend not including that, keeping it short and keeping it within the parameters of what they're asking for here. So how do you get started on the application? You can log into apply.universityofcalifornia.edu and create an account. It's going to look like this when you go ahead to start to fill it out. Of course, you start with the easy stuff and begin collecting information, filling out the personal information section on the About You tab. And now the real work begins, right? So now that you got your overview of the UC application system, you should be off to the races, right?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeffrey. There was definitely a lot of information in there, everyone. So keep your eyes peeled on your email tomorrow. We will send out this recording if you want to revisit any part of it. And before we dive into our Q&A, here is just a clearer breakdown of some of our top results from this past year. I won't read them all to you, but here they are for your perusal. Now, you have probably been getting a few emails about this, but next week we are hosting a live admissions event. So, that committee we were talking about in the beginning, how your application, your child's application, gets through that first reader, and then before they get that acceptance letter, the admissions committee has to agree and admit that student. But what does that process look like? There have been lots of questions about it, so we are peeling back the curtain and showing you exactly what happens around that table, the debates that ensue, how the admissions officers pitch those students. Um, we're showing it all. We are letting you guys know all of the harsh truths so you can register for that event here. That is next week. We will answer all of the mysterious questions about the admissions process and unveil it so you guys can be in the know on exactly what happens. And here is a chart of our programs and services. We, of course, have programs for younger students from 5th grade all the way until 12th grade for our undergraduate work. Our application counseling. So we help build your applications 2-on-1 with the help of a former admissions officer and a graduate coach from scratch to perfection. Something not listed here is our final review service. So a former admissions officer will review your application, create a detailed report on the percentage of completion that it is, any notes that they see. It's kind of just like a really in-depth document where they go through line by line and pick it apart in the nicest way possible so that it can be as strong of an application as it can be. If you are interested in any of our services or how we can help you and your student and get them into that dream school, you can hit yes on the poll that I just launched. So your consultation will be about a 30-minute call where we will learn all about you, your student, what they're interested in, what they want to go to school for, of course, answer any questions you have about us, and we will come together and create the best plan we can on how we can get your student into that dream school. And with that in mind, we will dive into some questions. Okay, so first question. Can I contest my financial aid package for an improved quantity? For example, if I got accepted into my top choice UC, however, another institution I also applied to offers me more financial aid. Can I email the financial aid office of my first choice to better match the offer I received?
Short answer, yes. Longer answer is it depends on the school, it depends on the year, depends on a number of factors. Really, I would say it doesn't hurt to ask. And so if that's something that you want to consider, it absolutely is going to change year to year, to be honest with you. It depends on how their yield is looking. If they feel like they need to admit more students or they don't want to lose a particular student, that may come into play. So again, longer answer, it doesn't hurt to ask, and I would recommend doing so if you feel the need to.
How are appealed applications reviewed differently from a regular decision?
How are appealed applications reviewed differently from regular decision? Um, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question, other than to say, each application in the regular decision pool is reviewed twice. If there's any kind of discrepancy within that, that goes to another person to go over and review. They then go take the applications and they, similar to what Dorothy just mentioned, it's going to be happening next week, kind of argue over the students and to see who should get in. An appeal should be kind of just if you feel that they missed something in your application that was that you want to emphasize or some kind of change that occurred, maybe an improvement in grades or something like that, to have them just maybe consider it again. It doesn't hurt to try, some kind of similar to that last answer I just gave you. But I would say at that point, you're probably talking more of a smaller pool of people looking at that appeal.
So if a student completed geometry outside of school and not through the school itself, should that be reported?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Record that and mention how you learned that course. So if it was something not offered at your school, but you wanted to take it for a particular reason, again, in the additional comment section, that could be explained briefly, emphasis on briefly, to explain why you did that, especially if it was like to leapfrog to get to, say, calculus because you're applying for a STEM major, for example. That would be helpful context.
Hmm. Can you talk through letters of recommendation in the UC system?
So the only one that might take rec letters is UC Berkeley. They don't take them on the front end. They review applications, and some students are selected to and requested letters of rec. That is not an indicator that you're going to get in or not. Don't lead into that. They honestly just randomly select students and ask for two rec letters. That's only UC Berkeley that does that.
Okay. Does the UC application system share information between campuses about where a student has applied and their admission status?
Okay. I should have waited on shaking my head no. Uh, so um, you can see a past history of like where the students in that school have applied to on that end. It's kind of something in context, but that is not regarded like it's not like, oh, they're applying to UCLA, so they're not going to like us. That's not how it's looked at all. So when they say nine campuses, one application, they really do mean that. And you are selected if they feel you're a strong fit to be successful on their campus. And if Davis feels that and UCLA took you and you feel like going to UCLA, that's not going to hurt anyone's feelings on Davis campus. So they, again, um, don't think that selecting a certain school over another one's gonna impact you in some way.
Okay. For the additional information section, can I write about two different things or should I only focus on one?
I would focus on anything that needs to be entered in that's an important context. Again, anything that was a dramatic change in your life in some way, maybe say you moved. So here's an example of one, right? They can see that when you report the schools you attended and the grades. We've often seen students with like different curriculums. Say they were in an AP curriculum and they shifted over to an IB curriculum. Well, they know that if you change schools, they know that you can't sustain your extracurriculars over the course of 4 years. You can't be in the same club, for example. If that impacted you in some way, if you were, say, maybe more limited at your second school, that would be a good area to put that. So again, issues where in context is important. They don't want to have anything count against you that otherwise would if you didn't explain it. I would keep it brief, and I would make sure that you only put it there if it's relevant to that what I just spoke about. If you have no other extenuating circumstances, leave it blank.
Okay. Um, okay, so for activities and awards section, should you rank the activities and list the most important ones first?
Yeah, I would. Kind of similar to the Common App. The one now, I will emphasize this that every application gets a full read, and that was something that was very specific in the training that I did. Emphasized throughout the whole process. Every applicant gets a full read from the first word to the last word. Okay, so anything that gets put in there has to be read by the reviewers. But with that said, you know, it's natural to want to emphasize your strengths and the most impactful things first. And so again, we are human beings. We tend to um, look at that first and kind of remember those things that stand out to us. But again, with that said, the activities and award section is just kind of a starting spot. The PIQs is where you're going to launch into something that gives you more full context. And so um, that's an important section of of the application, but it's really the PIQs that gives you the space to really talk more in detail that they're looking for.
Do admissions officers really want to read long descriptions of activities?
Yes. So we wouldn't sign up for it if we didn't. So no, honestly, you know, what the hardest thing for me to so we go through like a whole month of training before the application process starts. And the reason why is because they want to make sure that you can understand the context of students applying to the UCs. And so, you know, you come away seeing some pretty amazing stuff that kids are doing. And honestly, I found it inspiring, you know, to see what this next up and coming generation is really getting themselves involved in. So, yeah, no, I absolutely, again, we wouldn't do it if we didn't like it.
Can I put a list of my publications in conferences and journals in the additional information section, or just an abstract of one paper in this section?
You can. In UC Berkeley, we were told not to click on those links. I can't say the same for every UC's. It's going to the policy is going to be different depending on the school, and it could be different year to year. So I don't work for UC Berkeley anymore. So I can tell you during my time, we were told not to click on those links. The students needed to explain things within the parameters of the application itself. If you feel a need to post it, that's not going to count against you. I would just say because we are coached to read everything, keep that section brief and pertaining to what's relevant. I wouldn't use that to go ahead and start publishing your abstract or things like that.
Okay, if a student took a bunch of courses on YouTube, Udemy, Coursera, should they put that in the extracurricular activities or additional information?
I would put it in the courses that you took. So the additional courses, if they don't fit through the A through G letters, that section can be so it can be listed in your activity section. If you um, if you took a course to learn a skill that you used for something else, that could also be mentioned within it as well. And then, of course, there's those PIQs that talk about a passion or a thing that you love doing or a skill that you've developed. And if those courses that you took are part of that story, make sure to include those in there.
Okay, and then our last question came in through the chat. So, can you rank these in the order of importance? GPA, APs, extracurricular extracurricular activities, excuse me, volunteering, and then the personal statement.
Yes. But to give you a longer answer, no, all those things get factored in. I guess what I you could say is that it is half academic and half extracurricular. And because there's no test requirement, no SAT or ACT, that's not going to be a factor, right? So they're really focusing on your academic coursework, your grades, your test scores. By that I mean APs or A-level exams or GCSEs or things like that, and your extracurricular involvement. So it's really kind of split evenly between those two. A student who was just a rock star extracurricularly, but got all Fs, is going to have trouble getting into these schools. And a student who got excellent grades and all fives on their APs or all sevens on their IB scores, but didn't really do much outside of their classes, is going to have a tough time getting into those schools as well. So really, it's kind of a balance between the two.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and answering all of these questions. I know our audience greatly appreciates it.
My pleasure. Absolutely.